Hi, my name is Ryan Lichttenegger. I own and operate Steel Wheel Farm. We're in Falls City, Washington in the Snoqualmie River Valley. We farm approximately 14 acres of mixed vegetables, grain, pastured hogs, some poultry. Um, Most of our outlets include selling direct to restaurants, to farmers markets, and our farmers cooperative in the valley. Today I'm going to talk to you about our irrigation system. It's not the best and it's not refined, but it's what I found works on our scale and for the number of farmers we have on our team. This is the irrigation setup on Steel Wheel Farm for the surface water. I'm going to explain a little bit about how we set it up and the equipment we use to pump water out of the river. I'll start at this end. The Snow Valley Water Improvement District will rent out a fish screen. This is what that looks like. This is a 2-inch fish screen. The water goes into the screen and then is sucked out of this fitting. This is a brass backflow valve, which allows the water to go this way, but not back into the fish screen. This is super important for the vitality of the fish and baby salmon smolt. Doesn't create a huge suction. And usually doesn't get clogged up with anything. The next important thing to have is a hose that connects to from the surface of the bank to the fish screen. You don't want a collapsible hose, so I found that this flexible PVC pipe has been really easy to use. It's basically made out of spiralized white PVC and this poly casing. It allows it to flex but not collapse. And then you can see you can also glue joints directly to it. Fittings fit right over that. This is a 2-inch pipe. We use these coupler fittings. We find them really easy to reuse every year. They fit right onto both ends pretty easily. So from the river, this sits at the bottom, pointed across stream, and then about 15 feet, 20 feet up the bank, we have our filter system. We currently don't run a filter in it because the water is typically really clean. If it was really dirty, I would insert the disc filter part into the canister here. So right now we just run it, there's nothing in it. The water comes through, and then we have a bleed off section. So this is put at the highest point of the irrigation line. And we do that because we want to get all the air out of the system. So we can open this up when the pump is starting to pull water out, or if you want to backfill your irrigation line into the river, you can fill the line with water from here. Typically I put a funnel in here, fill it with water. Most of the air burps out of it. We also have a pressure gauge here. This tells us how much pressure the pump is pushing. You can see there. Typically this pump will run about 40 psi. And then from that point we have our water meter. And this is also rented by the Water Improvement District. This will monitor the amount of water usage you're pulling out of the river. And it keeps a rolling tally every year, so we just send in our numbers at the end of the season. That brings us to the pump. So the pump is drawing water from the river. This is the inlet. This pump was purchased from Rainflow out of Pennsylvania. I went with that decision because it had the extra tank for a longer run capacity. They also had a good price on the pump unit itself. It's a high pressure 2-inch pump. One thing that we did to modify it was add a timer, and I've taken it off right now, but we mount this to a post next to the pump, and we can use it to set the timer, and it'll shut the motor off after the desired time. So this is a 12-hour timer. Typically we're running 4 to 6 hour periods of irrigation. It's super handy, but if you get the timer, you got to make sure to get the kind that's like, they call it, it's a shut-off timer, but it's basically breaking the electrical current from the motor, which is different than a lot of other timers. This pump is gas powered. It's just got a marine tank on it, and it's 5-gallon capacity. It's pretty efficient and really easy to start, like most small engines. Relatively maintenance free. Check the oil. Most of my crew understands how it works, and they can fire it up whenever we need to run water. Yeah, that's our pump setup. Okay, this is our irrigation spot by the river. Right now we're on the levee. It's about 15 feet up from the surface of the river. You can see right here, this pallet is placed. This is where we set our pump, so it's on a level surface. And then we have this nice tree that we can strap the pump to so it doesn't shake off. It's also really important to chain any equipment up so thieves don't take it. So keep note of that. You can look down here. This is where the intake pipe goes down the bank. And typically the water's a little bit lower than this, but we're able to set the intake and the fish screen down into the water. And typically it's pretty good all season. We don't have to adjust it for the fluctuation in river height. So it comes up here to the pump, and then from the pump we have our filtration system and the water meter. And this would be the highest point of the water line, so we're able to bleed off the air. And then from the output, we hook flue hose. This is 2-inch flue hose with cam lock fittings, and all of our hose systems have either a male or female coupler on the end, and they go into the field. And I'll show you that process. So I'm going to talk about one of our sprinkler irrigation systems that we use with the 2-inch line coming from the pump. This was a line I built. They're about 50 feet in length. The parts consist of a 2-inch threaded T, 2-inch male barb, and a 2-inch female coupler. And each sprinkler section is set up the same way, so they all interlock together. We typically run 8 to 10 of them at a time, depending on the length of the beds. These are 18-inch risers, and some of the sprinklers have these Nelson sprinkler heads, which I just started using a couple years ago. It's a plastic head that has a constant stream of water that slowly rotates around, hits these plastic flanges sticking down, and breaks the water up into a spray. They require about 40 psi to run. We get really close to that psi, but we're usually a little bit under. Also, custom developed this sprinkler stand so they don't tip over. It's just a piece of welded rebar on this pipe, so really easy to move these around and drag them into place. And then we just use your foot to push the stand down, and it keeps it from falling over. Pretty easy to move around by yourself, but typically we use 2 people, one person on each end of the lines carrying them down and setting them up. Process doesn't take too long to connect them all together. This is the other type of sprinkler that we use with this 2-inch line. These are just impact heads. They're brass. They have a double nozzle, so there's water comes out this side and this side, and they shoot water by impacting and turning like that. Pretty similar setup. This one's got a poly riser, and it's got an end piece. So this is what we use at the end of our beds. Puts down a little bit more water than those Nelson plastic sprinklers. The downside to these is they do require a little bit higher PSI, so we're having trouble running these with adequate pressure. Okay, so this is the second type of irrigation system we use. This can be used with a well or with surface water, and that pump I showed you earlier. We have the blue hose runs out to the field, and then we can run multiple lateral lines off the blue hose. And we use this system here, which is 1-inch poly blue stripe hose, which can be purchased from Toro. And then we use a series of these poly 1-inch couplers to connect multiple lateral lines together. So this is a little T system that we developed. All of our lateral lines have this female 1-inch coupler, so they can be plugged in anywhere along the header line. And then we can add more lines by adding the T and continue off. Each one of these lines contains 6 wobbler head sprinklers. These are 150-foot beds. We use the wobblers. I found that they're really efficient in watering evenly, and they're super easy to move around. So I'll show you that right now. Wobbler head sprinkler is just on this steel spike, 48-inch steel spike, and it's got a soft poly hose. It goes into your lateral with just a plastic coupler fitting or compression fitting. They pull apart pretty easily. There's a male piece and a female piece, and they're just barb fitted into the poly hose. Pretty simple. The sprinkler itself, super lightweight. You can get all kinds of different nozzle fittings or different sized sprinklers for different capacities, and how the water fans out. These are pretty high volume. Try to put down as much water as possible in a short amount of time. So this is the gray nozzle. Really easy for one person to move an entire line by themselves. You can pick all these up, hold them in one arm, and then you can drag the header or the lateral line from one bed to another pretty easily. Our system can usually run 4 sprinkler lines at a time. We find that we have just enough pressure to do that. This is our third method of irrigation. We use some drip tape on some crops, but it's pretty limited. And the way we hook it up is we've got the 1-inch poly cam locks, and then that goes to a fitting to our 2-inch or 1.5-inch blue hose. From there, we can create headers that go to as much as 5 or 6 beds. Each bed for us has 3 lines. We punch in these emitters that have an on-off valve on them. I find these really helpful to be able to turn off a line if it breaks and needs repair. You can find those fittings at DripWorks. They're really handy. Then our drip tape. Here, try to get drip tape that's a high flow. We've got a couple different kinds. You can see here. I prefer the blue stripe drip tape. It does a better job of even watering. Also seems not to get clogged as easily. I prefer the 10 or 15 mil drip tape. One of our future irrigation goals is to develop a system that has less lines laying on the roads or in the fields. We'd like to bury some of our more permanent header lines. This would be a lot easier with the flooding that we have to put up with, and then also driving through the fields during the season. It'll make it a lot easier. We don't have to fix as much pipe. One of the other irrigation tools that we'd like to utilize next year or the years in the future is a retractable sprinkler system, something that's on a reel that brings the sprinkler back in over a certain amount of time. I find that pretty useful, I think, in pre-irrigation and stale bedding, getting ready for direct seeding.